Life in jail for a certain number of years with no chance of parole. You can hear me say these words at the end of every video. They're sentences for life in prison for violent criminals and wrongdoers. But what we don't realize is that these numbers given by the jury at the time of sentencing are limited. Many of these cruel killers do get out in the end. It could be 10, 20, or 30 years from now, but many do. In today's case, the killer has been out of jail for almost a year after killing an innocent person. 17-year-old Mackenzie Cowell was about to turn 18. She was a high school student who wanted to work in the beauty business. On February 9, 2010, she mysteriously disappeared, and her disappearance devastated the community of Wenatchee, Washington. Many people thought that someone she saw every day was responsible for her disappearance, but that wasn't what happened. The terrifying and confusing case of Mackenzie Cowell will leave you speechless and angry, because even though the case is solved, you have to wonder if justice was really done. Andrew Mackenzie. On April 1, 1992, Nicole Cowell was born to Reed and Wendy Cowell. Mackenzie lived in Orondo, Washington, and was a senior at Wenatchee High School at the time of the case. According to her parents, she was a happy and active girl who loved to dance and was on the school dance team. In 2010, she also joined a local dance studio in Wenatchee. Mackenzie was busy with her studies and spent time with both of her divorced parents. Her dad, Reed, started dating a woman named Sandy Francis, and her mum, Wendy, started dating a man named Joe Fisher. Mackenzie knew exactly what she wanted to do with her life. She was a good student in school and decided to enroll in a cosmetology job training program at the Academy of Hair Design in downtown Wenatchee. Mackenzie was passionate about hair and makeup and wanted to become a beautician. She even modeled at the academy. For Mackenzie, this training was a 2-for-1 deal. She could get real-world experience working as a cosmetologist while also getting extra credit for her transcript. It's safe to say that Mackenzie had a plan for her future, and she was set on making her dreams come true. Mackenzie was an eager young woman with big plans. She wasn't afraid to go for the top, and her drive to succeed made her liked by almost everyone. Mackenzie loved putting herself out there and wasn't the type to say no. He was born to stand out. Fun for everyone, Mackenzie's life was full and happy, and she was on her way to great things. But one terrible day, everything changed. Mackenzie quit the Academy of Hair Design in February 2010 and didn't come back. February in Washington, D.C. is cold and windy, with temperatures dropping to about 19 degrees. Mackenzie's February 19, 2010 was a cold and windy day in Washington, D.C., and she was working at the academy at 3 p.m. Mackenzie chose to go out for a while and even asked her friends at the academy if it was okay for her to do so. They said it was fine. A bundle-up was caught on CCTV. Mackenzie walked to the parking lot, got in her red 1999 Pontiac Grand Prix, and pulled out right away. Cell phone records later showed that Mackenzie sent a text message to her boyfriend Jen saying, "Hey, what's up?" It looks like this was the last time Mackenzie would ever use her phone. Mackenzie didn't look like she was in a hurry, and her friends said she'd be gone for only 15 minutes. But more than 15 minutes went by, and there was still no sign of Mackenzie. At first, this didn't bother her friends. They thought she was just late because she changed her plans. Mackenzie's friends didn't call the police right away because she knew she wasn't with her dad. Every Wednesday, Mackenzie would meet her dad Reed for dinner and watch movies all night. This had been a tradition between the two of them for a long time, so Mackenzie's friends thought she must have lost track of time with her dad. What they didn't know was that Reed kept waiting for Mackenzie to show up for dinner. But she never did. A stressed Reed called and texted Mackenzie a lot, but she didn't answer as the clock struck 8 o'clock, which was her bedtime. Reed's life was a mess, and he was scared and worried about his daughter Mackenzie. He knew Mackenzie to be a responsible, on-time girl who never missed a bedtime and always picked up the phone when it rang, no matter how busy she was. Reed knew this wasn't normal, so he decided not to wait any longer. Reed reported 17-year-old Mackenzie Cowell missing, and luckily, the police acted right away after Reed told them that she hadn't made it home. The police decided to look for Mackenzie everywhere. They checked in with her friends, her mum Wendy, and even her boyfriend's friend Joy. But Mackenzie seemed to have vanished into thin air, leaving no clues behind. Her car was also nowhere to be found, and she hadn't gone back to the academy either. All of her phone calls were going to voicemail. The cops called about a strange discovery. Someone in the area had found an abandoned red car in their driveway. The location was near Mission Ridge and about 40 miles from Mackenzie's home in Orondo. Soon, the police came and took the car. They checked the license plates and saw that it was registered in Reed's name. By looking at the type, they knew it was Mackenzie's Pontiac Grand Prix, but Mackenzie wasn't to be found, and it didn't look good for the lost girl who was in the abandoned car. Mackenzie's purse was found, but her phone, keys, and debit card were not. By the car, there was only one set of footprints in the dirt. The detectives looked at everything and decided to fully inspect the car, while everyone was thinking of a lot of questions. With the discovery of Mackenzie's car, the police and the Cowell family knew for sure that something was very wrong. Mackenzie's disappearance was no longer just a missing person case. A full-scale search was held, including ground and air searches with the help of a helicopter to look for any clues. The police even asked the FBI for help in finding Mackenzie, and volunteers from the community looked all over for her. 4 days after Mackenzie went missing, a horrific discovery was made that made the Cowell family very scared. A woman's body was found on the banks of the Columbia River near Quincy, Washington, which is about 20 miles away from Wenatchee. The body was found 50 yards from an empty house that was for sale at the time. The woman was fully dressed in the same black academy uniform that Mackenzie wore on the day she went missing, and her feet were in the water. There was discarded duct tape in several trash bags nearby. Soon after the body was found, it was tragically confirmed to be that of 17-year-old Mackenzie Cowell. The body was taken in for an autopsy, which showed that Mackenzie had died from strangulation and blunt force trauma to the head. What's even scarier is that the murder weapon, a long, sharp, serrated knife, was found lodged in her shoulder. Thankfully, there were no signs of assault. Mackenzie's family learnt of her death following the body's discovery. Mackenzie's parents were devastated by her death and couldn't believe that someone had been so cruel to Mackenzie, a smart young girl who would never hurt anyone. The Cow family knew that they needed closure, and that the only way they could get justice for their daughter was to make the person responsible pay the police. The Mackenzie Cowell Task Force was created to find possible suspects and persons of interest in Mackenzie's case. At first, investigators thought it might have been Mackenzie's boyfriend Joaquin. He agreed to take a polygraph test, but failed, which raised police suspicions. They thought it might have been Mackenzie's stepfather Joe, since he and Mackenzie had a pretty heated fight the day before she went missing, but the cops quickly cleared both men and said they had no connection to her. This meant that the detectives were back to square one. They talked to over 800 people and got many leads. Mackenzie Cowell's case became the biggest multi-agency investigation in the Wenatchee area since 1997. But detectives soon got a strange lead from a woman named Liz Reed. Liz's memory of what happened was believable, but she turned out to be unreliable because she was a drug addict, a police informant, and a college student. I'm not sure how the college student thing really fits into this, but Liz said that Mackenzie had been killed by two other drug dealers, Sam Cuevas and Emmanuel Serros, in a case of mistaken identity. Liz even said she saw a snuff film in which the two men admitted to killing Mackenzie by saying investigators believed Liz's story because she was able to describe the murder weapon before it became public, so it wasn't something everyone knew. Also, Liz gave the police a ring that seemed to belong to Mackenzie, and they were able to confirm this by showing a picture of her wearing the same ring in the past, even though Mackenzie's parents said they'd never seen it. When asked where she got the ring from, Liz said Sam told her to go to a dump to get it. But soon after her confession, Liz denied the whole thing, and detectives were able to confirm that neither she nor the two men she had mentioned had any connection to Mackenzie, and none of them were at the scene of the crime. On the day Mackenzie died, the detectives were stumped because the case had so many dead ends and leads that were not leading anywhere. But they didn't give up. The evidence they had gathered up to that point had to give them a clue, so they went through every single letter until they found one that would turn the case on its head. A letter from a police informant named Theo Keyes gave investigators their most important lead. In it, Theo said that his friend Christopher Wilson was responsible for Mackenzie's disappearance. So where were Theo and Christopher, and did the letter really have anything to do with Mackenzie's death? That's what Theo thought. He had a history of mental illness and was in jail for bad behavior in public, so it looked like the detectives were having a lot of déjà vu from this tip. But they decided to look into it anyway, and they were glad they did because there were a lot of coincidences in this tip, and specifically Christopher Wilson. Many things are unknown about Christopher Scott Wilson, but we do know that he went to the same school as Mackenzie, the Academy of Hair Design. He was a 29-year-old man with dyed black hair and a gothic air about him. He seemed like a normal, quiet guy. But in Theo's letter, it was said that Chris had an unhealthy fascination with death and serial killers. Chris also couldn't get enough of the crime show Dexter. Hannibal Lecter from the movie The Silence of the Lambs was another hero of Chris's. He had a tattoo of him on his arm. Now, liking scary or disturbing things doesn't necessarily make someone a serial killer. But what comes next might make you uneasy. When police looked into Chris's past, they found that he visited several online forums for serial killers. Researchers also learnt that Chris worked at Telford's Chapel of the Valley, a morgue in East Wake. According to his friends, Chris liked, quote, cutting people up, which is crazy to hear. On August 11, 2010, Chris was called in for an interview, and at first he was very cooperative. He said that he only knew Mackenzie as a fellow student, even though Theo's letter said that Chris had a crush on Mackenzie and that the two were dating, but no one can confirm this, so take it as you will. Chris agreed to give his DNA during the interview, and when it was compared to the DNA found on the duct tape at the scene, it was a match. All of these clues pointed to Chris as a possible suspect in Mackenzie's untimely death in October. Chris was brought in for another interview, but when asked about his DNA matching the DNA at the scene where Mackenzie's body was found, he stopped cooperating and talking to the police and demanded a lawyer. On October 6th, Chris was arrested and charged with second-degree murder and released on $1 million bail. However, DNA wasn't the only thing that led to his arrest. On the day Mackenzie left the academy, someone else followed soon after, and it was Chris. Another report said that a man matching Chris's description was seen where Mackenzie's car had been abandoned, so this couldn't have been a coincidence. Not only that, but Chris's old apartment, which was rented and only 3 blocks from the academy, was also searched by the police. At first look, nothing seemed strange until an aluminium test was done. Even though the flat was cleaned up after Chris moved out, the evidence lit up in one spot that was covered in carpet. This was a huge win for the cops. Another large area of dried blood was found under the carpet. This blood was matched to Mackenzie's. Cell phone records also showed that Mackenzie's phone last pinged from Chris's apartment between 3 p.m. and 3:42 p.m. on the day she disappeared. During the investigation, someone spoke out about their own experience with Chris before Mackenzie went missing and later died. The person, Shauna Novak, said that Chris had tried to strangle her at a party once until she passed out, which is very scary. Chris said he wasn't trying to hurt her when she told him to stop. I'd love to know how the situation really happened, because this story doesn't make sense to me. Anyway, Shah was clearly traumatized by this, and she was sure that Chris was trying to hurt her. If she hadn't fought back, who knows what Chris would have done. At this point, there was a lot of proof against Chris, and the police were sure they had caught him. But there was one more twist that showed more about Chris and his role in Mackenzie's death. In December 2011, Chris's ex-girlfriend Tessa Scoilman was arrested again. She was charged with helping Chris hide any evidence of the crime. Investigators looked through Chris's computer and found many disturbing photos and videos of Tessa acting like a dead body on the carpet where the bloodstain was found. They also found a video on Tessa's phone that showed Chris walking around the apartment with Tessa on June 24, 2010. And when the camera panned to the carpet, a large reddish-brown stain could be seen. 4 days later, another video showed Chris asking, quote, if the flat was clean as he walked around it. When asked this, Tessa gave a scary answer. Yes, given what happened, it's vague, but knowing what we know now, it's a haunting statement phone. It turned out that Chris and Tessa talked on the phone at 3:32 p.m. on February 9th. But that's not all. Chris and Tessa called each other 5 more times that night, and Chris even borrowed Tessa's car, even though he had his own fully functional car. Tessa's current boyfriend, who lives in the same area where Mackenzie's body was found near the Columbia River, said she called him on February 9th at around 9 p.m. People said that something bad had happened, so she asked him to pray for her. Tessa's car was searched for DNA, but a knife and cigarette ends were found inside. Even though the DNA didn't match what was found at the crime scene, Chris was being held without a trial because of a lot of proof against him. Between April 2011 and May 2012, Chris's charges were changed from second-degree murder to first-degree murder. Chris was offered a plea deal where he would get 6.5 years in prison for admitting to first-degree murder. Surprisingly, he turned down the deal. Chris's lawyer was none other than John Henry Brown. If you're a true crime fan, you know that John Henry Brown is one of the most well-known criminal defense lawyers in Seattle. He's defended many famous criminals and serial killers like Ted Bundy, Colton Harris Moore, also known as the Barefoot Bandit, and many others. Chris's defense was based on the idea that the blood found in his old flat was faked by the police. For some reason, the prosecution wasn't allowed to bring up Chris's job in a funeral home, his strange obsession with Dexter, or even his scary Hannibal Lecter tattoo. Instead, they thought Chris had somehow gotten Mackenzie to come to his flat, where he killed her now, We really don't know if Mackenzie voluntarily met Chris or if she was lured to meet him. At the end of the day, both of them left the academy separately, and there were no messages or other forms of communication between them. After killing Mackenzie, the prosecution thought that Chris moved her body from his apartment to the Columbia River and then left her car near Mission Ridge. In the end, Chris was offered another plea deal in which he would be sentenced to 14 years in prison. For first degree, Christopher Wilson was sentenced to 14 years and 3 months in prison for charges that were not connected to the case at hand. He was charged with first-degree manslaughter, first-degree robbery, and second-degree assault. Chris insisted he wasn't guilty and said he only agreed to the plea deal because he didn't think he would get a fair hearing. I think a more accurate way to say this is that as the trial went on, Chris realized how much evidence the prosecution had against him, so he dropped the charges. As for Tessa, she didn't get punished and was free to go. It was decided that there wasn't enough evidence to prove whether Tessa was involved in Mackenzie's death or not, but it's strange to know that she and Chris talked on the phone several times. The mysterious Get Creepy videos and the call she made to her boyfriend on February 9th make it seem like Tessa just barely avoided a bullet. Did she not know that Chris had killed Mackenzie? Sadly, we'll never know, but there's a very good chance she did. Chris had just made up a crazy story about the big spot on the floor, and Tessa believed it. She thought it was a joke, but we'll never know for sure. Not long after his sentence, Chris tried to change his guilty plea, but the Washington Court of Appeals turned it down. He was sent to Larch Correctional Center and then Monroe Correctional Center and would be available for parole in 2023 on December 11th, 2023. Christopher Wilson got out of prison after serving his sentence. He has to report to a community custody officer for the next 3 years and is on probation until December 2026. After Mackenzie's death, a memorial service was held in Wenatchee on February 25, 2010, with almost 1,800 people in attendance. Mackenzie's high school dance team paid tribute to her before hundreds of purple and pink balloons were released into the sky. The speeches and mentions of Mackenzie left people in tears. Everyone was feeling empty and in pain. Mackenzie's family goes through times of grief and pain when they miss her genuine smile and happy mood. Mackenzie had a lot to look forward to in life, and she was going to leave her mark on the world. The Cow family was left to pick up the pieces after Mackenzie's death, and they're still reeling from the haunting absence of such a vibrant soul in their lives. In the end, this case leaves you torn between satisfaction and dissatisfaction. Did Mackenzie really get justice? Yes and no. Yes, because the person who hurt her was caught. But no, because 14 years isn't even close to enough. And the fact that he's free today makes the whole case even scarier and more horrible. It's hard to believe that Chris's family stood by him despite DNA and other damning evidence. There are a lot of people who support Chris and blame the justice system for convicting an innocent person. But here's the thing. If you really give him the benefit of the doubt, there is a really small but real chance that Chris may have been innocent the whole time. For example, Chris had no known relationship with Mackenzie. The only thing we know about them is that they went to the same school. There were rumors that they were dating, but there was never any proof of this. We don't even have proof that they've ever talked to each other. Even stranger, a lot of people think Mackenzie's mother's boyfriend may have killed her because the day before she went missing, she got into a big fight with her mother and told her that she had to choose between her and her boyfriend because she couldn't have both. There was a good chance that the boyfriend had a good alibi for the night of the attack, But alibi claims have been disproved many times before, so you have to wonder. The strongest piece of evidence is Chris's claim that the police planted the blood in his flat. There's a chance that he might be telling the truth, since Mackenzie would have lost a lot of blood during the attack, but the amount found in his flat, according to some sources, was very small. Is this proof that it was planted? Is this proof that his flat wasn't the original crime scene? Is this proof that he covered his flat in plastic but left a small hole somewhere? We don't know. Even though I think Chris did it, there is some room for reasonable doubt. What's so frustrating is that if Chris really is guilty of the crime, which I believe he is, there's no reason why he would have killed Mackenzie. This case is so sad, even though the killer got their sentence. It seems like Chris's punishment for killing Mackenzie was barely more than a slap on the wrist. We can't even imagine how Mackenzie's family feels now that their daughter's killer is free. We can only hope that they find peace and comfort in the memories Mackenzie made with them in her very short 17 years of life. And that's the end of today's case. What are your thoughts? Let's discuss in the comments. If you enjoy true crime, be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a new case. Until next time, stay safe and stay curious.